It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
So, my friends, he's been teaching in China for 10 years. He was on the Sam Lesante Show 10 years ago. And a lot of things have happened in China. You'll be surprised. Let me give you an example of some of the things we're going to talk about. Okay, he mentions that the viewers can learn about China's implementation of a social score for every Chinese citizen. Now listen to this. The way it works, if you have bad credit, committed a crime, made negative comments about the Chinese government, or if a Chinese official feels you are a person of low character, you will unfortunately find yourself restricted from traveling in China by train, or plane. You will also find yourself restricted from buying property or traveling outside of China. If you also have a low social score, your children will be restricted from traveling abroad for an education. Interesting, right? My guest is Thomas O'Neill. Folks, he's been teaching there for 10 years. Tom, nice to have you back on the show.
Yeah, it's been 10 years, Sam.
And we're getting younger.
Yeah, well, I'm much thinner than it was last time.
Thomas, first of all, you know, you're originally from Shenandoah, right? Why did you decide to go to China to teach?
Well, I had different jobs over the years. I started out as a corrections officer in Maryland, and then I was promoted to parole and probation. I was the senior agent, parole and probation, Glen Burnie office in Maryland. And then I worked mental health. I was intensive case manager with mental health, and they outsourced the mental health department because they didn't have enough money in the general fund to fund MHMR. So then I got involved with a foreign exchange program, and I had some Chinese students that were exchange students. My job was to find them host families, and it was very difficult in Schuylkill County to try to find families that would be willing to take students in from China. Mm-hmm. But the Catholic schools, they were willing to pay full tuition for the Catholic schools. So I was thinking, like Cardinal Brennan and some of the other Catholic schools that closed, if every family that had a child in a Catholic school, if they were to take in one foreign exchange student, the schools would still be open today because they would have doubled the enrollment. Exactly. Because they're willing to pay full tuition. Mm-hmm. So they asked me if I wanted to be a guest teacher in China for one semester. So I said, yeah, I thought it would be a great opportunity. So I went there, and I had a really good rapport with the students. The students loved my classes because I have a great sense of humor, and I like making the students laugh, so they enjoyed my classes. So they asked me if I wanted to do it for another semester, and then I was there for almost 10 years.
10 years, yeah. It was a long bout, huh?
And I'm going back in June. In June I'm going back. I'm going to volunteer with the summer camp, and then I'll be teaching grade 6 at the same school. Yeah. So it's unusual for an American to be teaching that long in a foreign country in the same school. It's
Did you know Chinese before the language?
No, most of the Chinese I learned was from the students.
Is that right?
But the funny thing about the Chinese language is the tone of the voice gives the word its meaning. And in America, in English, we have a lot of slang words. In Chinese, if you don't pronounce the word correctly, they might think you're saying something totally different. Uh-huh. And so I used to get a lot of reaction from the students, but they understand that I'm just making stupid mistakes with the language. Mm-hmm. And the Chinese teachers understand that Chinese is very difficult for Westerners because of the tones mm-hmm. in the voice. But they found that Chinese students who are bilingual, they almost naturally have an interest in music because of the tones, and the
I was just talking about their culture. But looking at the teaching in a Chinese school, okay, what kind of school is it? Was it a high-profile school, or was it?
It's a private school.
It's a private school, okay.
But the Chinese students, Sam, is like, they'll get up at 6 in the morning and they'll have breakfast. Then they do morning exercises. And then and at 7 o'clock in the morning, they'll have their first class. And they won't finish till 8 in the evening, and then they'll have 2 hours of homework. They're more academically disciplined. So when they travel abroad, when they come to America, they could outperform American students. But because of all that bombardment with information, they found that a lot of Chinese students lack creativity because they don't have the playtime. American students, they have more free time, and so they use their imagination with play and even like with movies. The Chinese, they love American movies because of the special effects and stuff like that. But if you give them a lot of like dialogue, they'll lose interest.
How old were your students?
When I first started, they were young. They were maybe 8 or 9. Then I moved to students that were around 12 and 14. And then I went into middle school, and they were like around 13, 14, 15. And then I taught high school. Mm-hmm. But they changing all the requirements now in China because so many foreigners want to go to China to teach.
Why is that?
The Chinese students, they're more disciplined, and they really want to learn. And English, they see English as a bridge to the future. And they see that like once they master the English language, they'll have a brighter future. And they say it's a bridge to the world. Like they'll be able to like communicate, no matter what country they go to, they'll be able to find people to communicate with, and they could do global business globally. And the world has become so global, so smaller because of technology. And so a lot of Americans, they'll go to China, they'll teach for a couple of years, and they'll put that on their resume, and they could put it towards their teaching certificate. But I'm very, very extremely lucky because I'm not a certified, I'm a certified ESL teacher, but I'm not a certified teacher when it comes to like going through like schooling to be a certified teacher. I got my ESL certificate in China, and so I'm able to teach. But now they changed you have to be a national certified teacher to teach high school now in China. So they're telling me that I could take courses online and get my certification.
Talking about you mentioned the word discipline. Okay, now I taught school in 1967 in a parochial school for 2 or 3 years. Then I went to the Career Center. And we as teachers, all right, we saw the students, and you had certain disciplines that teachers were able to do, okay?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Now, and I don't know whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. So we look at discipline today, and when I say on my show, today, you know, God bless the teachers, because I wouldn't want to be a teacher today. And I say that because of the fact that these children, some of them, do not have discipline.
No. They have no respect for their teachers.
That's the problem, okay? And so we're paying a price for it today in society. Now, I mentioned here about the politics, okay?
Well, it's the parents, Sam. It's if the parents have great respect for, if they see the importance of their child getting a really decent education, and they see the benefit of having a great education, they're going to instill that in their children. So if the parents don't have respect for teachers and the education system, their children are not going to have respect for the education system. And like when I was in grade 5, our teacher had a paddle behind his desk with holes in it. And he would give you an ultimatum. I'm going to give you 5 whacks with the paddle, or I'm going to call your father.
Yeah.
I always took the 5 whacks with the paddle.
Because you didn't want to be. That's exactly right.
Because if I got home, I didn't want to have to I didn't want to have to deal with my father. You know?
And I went to parochial school, so I know exactly what you're saying. Okay. The point is now. There's a questionable here. I mean, you don't want to beat the kids up, okay?
Yeah.
But you had that fear and respect for the teacher because your parents instilled that into you, all right? When you went home, you were afraid to tell your parents, you know, sister or the teacher yelled at me today because this. Well, what did you do wrong?
Yeah, exactly.
Today it's the reverse. With that teacher, they don't even listen to. They want to sue the teacher. They want to criticize the teacher. There's all kind of nonsense going on. So what do you expect these teachers to do? And I see the difference in culture, correct me if I'm wrong, between Chinese and here. Okay, now private schools here, or parochial schools, may be a little bit more strict. I'm not sure. But what you see today, it's heartbreaking, particularly for teachers. You know, so your discipline, when they listen to you in China, correct?
They fear the Chinese teachers. If a student misbehaves and you put him out in the hall, the Chinese teacher sees the student out in the hall. They do not want to go out in the hall. They do not want to have to deal with the Chinese teachers because of the discipline. They'll take stuff away from them, like some privileges. Like they love computer class. So the class that they love the most, they'll take them out. Like I had a Chinese teacher come to me one time. She said, "Tom, I have 7 students that didn't do their homework, so they're not going to be in your class because they love your class. So they're not going to be in your class because for your class they have to do their homework."
Yeah.
So that's one way. And then if they call their parents, they don't want to have to deal with their. See, in China it's different. Their grandparents raise the kids. So the grandparents, no, they're retired. The grandparents pay for their child's education because the difference between America and China, the grandparents through their entire working years, they would put 25% of their income aside as a savings, or they'll invest their income, 25% of their income, all the way up. And so then when their grandchildren are born, they'll use that money for their child's education. And there's a big housing bubble like in China. I don't know if you heard stories about huge shopping centers with no occupants and big apartment buildings with no occupants. There was a huge housing bubble. Like the Chinese, like the grandparents would buy a condo in a building. So instead of the investors going to a bank, like they'll get individual investors to buy a condo. So then when the building is completely built, they'll quadruple their money because they sell the entire building. They're not like.
Yeah. So it's interesting because you find the culture. Folks, I'm talking to Tom O'Neill. He was taught in China for 10 years. He's going back to teach. A lot of differences in discipline and culture. Where are we going, though, folks? Where are we going here in the United States with our educational systems? We spend billions of dollars on educating our young people. Are they getting the proper education? How much of that is political? How much is that political? And how is that hurting our country today? We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. 24/7, SSBTV.com. Watch all of our shows. Download the app. 21 local programs, neighbor talking to neighbor. Okay, no nonsense on your apps. This is all stuff, important stuff for you to know about. For example, my show today with Tom O'Neill talking about China. He taught there for 10 years, going back to teach. What do we learn from that? Just search SSPTV on the app. We're talking about discipline, Tom, and the difference between the when I say political, okay, the problem is when education is tied into politics, becomes a problem, okay, and so then where is the accountability? Where is the money being invested? Our school taxes are through the roof. People who have properties are paying a lot of money. Here, how is that different in China? Like, who pays for the school system? How did, you're in Suzhou, right? Suzhou. And you're speaking international foreign language there in China. So how does that differ? Who funds it? What are the accountabilities of you as a teacher? How does that work?
Well, in the United States, only 33% of adults have a college degree, a four-year college degree, because the cost, it's becoming more and more expensive for the average person to go to school. And then when they do get a four-year degree or a master's degree, they're in debt, thousands and thousands of dollars. In China, if you do extremely well in school, if you take all the students in China, like high school students and college students, that's more than the entire population of America. And there's such a demand to get into good schools and get a decent education. The schools, the colleges and universities in China, getting like really good grades isn't enough anymore. They look to see if you were involved in talent shows, if you won speech contests. They want to know like what your score in your English score is. And so if you have a really high grades and you do charity work, if you do you're involved in talent shows and speech contests, they'll accept you and you don't have to pay for the university. But there's private universities that are very expensive, and they only take the very, very top students. So a lot of students, in order to save face, their parents will send them to America, Australia, England, and the universities, the Ivy League schools like Harvard just got sued because there's because a disproportionate amount of students that they were taking, like all the students that qualified that were from Asia weren't getting accepted because they're claiming they're being discriminated against. But Harvard had something like 22% Asians, and they're saying if there were African American or of another race that they would have been accepted.
What happened to and I don't care what race you are, okay? So, because when you start talking about qualifications and meeting certain quotas, etc., then people start thinking, well, you're being prejudiced. Well, I don't know what I'm being prejudiced about. The fact is that if you're going to qualify for something, you need to qualify for something. But what have you seen? All right, now I've been out of King's College many years, and high college. But I know when I went to King's College what it was, all right, and what it was teaching. Okay, now my daughter does teach part-time at the college, and has a great reputation. But what have you seen with the colleges, the teachers we have in college, okay, and how much that we're seeing now their political agenda being taught to students, all right, which I don't think is right. Teach your course, all right, and people they're getting away with this, okay. We're seeing demands put on teachers that they shouldn't be putting on the demands, okay. What's the difference between China and the United States that you saw or see?
Well, I have my own personal opinion, and I get people angry when I say it, but the teachers' unions are protecting the wrong teachers sometimes. They're protecting teachers that shouldn't be in the classroom, and they're not doing their job. It's like it's difficult to remove a teacher from the classroom that does not qualify to be in the classroom once they've gotten their tenure. In China, they could fire you at will. I mean,
in other words, if you're not doing your job,
yeah, they'll just get rid of you.
Okay, and so now what you just said, there are teachers that are complete bums, okay, that should not be teaching, particularly in colleges. To me, they're complete bums, all right, and those teachers should be removed. But again, you have tenure. It's only because of the fact that they're putting their own political agenda, brainwashing these kids, all right, and with two sides. I'm not saying one side. But that doesn't mean that you're against the union. It means that there's certain teachers that should not be teaching.
I'm talking about. I'm not really talking about university teachers. I'm talking more about high school teachers.
Yes, I know what you're saying. Yeah,
and
I saw them. Yeah.
And I mean, you look on the news. If you could go to YouTube and just type in bad teachers, and you could see like these videos that students have taken of their teachers that should be in the classroom.
Well, okay. So here again, this is where it gets touchy. Okay, this is where people, we have the bums. Okay, I call them bums because they're doing their students an injustice. Now, keep in mind. That's only a small part.
It's very small, yeah.
Because I know that most of the teachers in our district here in Hazleton and Schuylkill, they definitely are worth their weight in gold as far as I'm concerned. Because but there are some that are decaying these people.
Yeah, the majority of teachers have a noble occupation,
yes.
And I have great respect for teachers, no matter where they're from, China, America, but I get angry when I see certain behavior in the classrooms from teachers that should never step foot in the classroom. And I've seen foreign teachers in China too they have teaching certificates and they're never going to succeed as a teacher.
But you see, in China, as I read in the beginning, they take no nonsense. Okay, if and thank God we're free. And people can say what they want to say, hopefully. I don't know if that's going to be the case down the road, how free we're going to be in the United States. But you see, what happens is we're brainstorm. They lie to us. The politicians lie to us. So they give you what you want, and then they get you, and then you're done. Okay, and that's so sad for my grandchildren. See. That's so sad because we're going to see that happen down the road. In China, that doesn't happen. Okay.
Well, when Obama was president, at his last term in office, a lot of Asians were coming to the United States, and they were graduating from Ivy League schools, and they're highly educated in areas of science, technology. But they weren't allowed to remain in the United States, to work. And so what we were doing, we were providing China and other Asian countries with a lot of these scientists, highly skilled people. And so Obama said, well, okay, if you graduate from a major university in the area of science, technology, we'll allow you to stay in the country. Most of the technology that's in China now, there's a company called Tennyson that does artificial intelligence, and they built this quantum computer. Now, they could be making it up. There's no way I could verify whether what they're saying is true or not, but they claim that they built a computer that can make 2 trillion calculations a second. And they could, all this information, all this data is like, if you use like an app called WeChat, over 1 billion people use WeChat. So that means like there's billions of texts going out all the time.
Yeah.
These servers take in all the text messages and all the information on every citizen in China.
Yeah. It's interesting because throughout my years of experience, I've seen wonderful Chinese people, Japanese, African Americans, all these people have a lot to offer, and we the Hispanic people who there's tremendous amount of talent. Okay, when you work together, you do well. But when you start trying to fractionize these people, Tom, that's where you build resentment in. Okay, and that's where it's so difficult sometimes, particularly for elderly people who've worked all their lives and they're seeing all this stuff going down the tubes. Okay, but there's a great opportunity here. A fabulous opportunity.
Social media is a wonderful thing, but the problem is with the young. They use social media for everything. They're not communicating one-on-one. It's like
and we're paying the price for that.
And there's loneliness. I mean, the area like loneliness in universities today is higher than.
And who's to blame for
ever
that?
Before that?
Who's to blame for that? Yeah.
I don't think it's one.
If you're a parent, and you're sitting at the table and your kids are on their text, okay, and instead of conversation, you should say, all right, give me the phone, okay, because they're lacking those social skills, and we're the cause of that. We don't want to offend our children. We don't want to offend our grandchildren. We don't want to upset anybody. But in the meanwhile, it's decaying our social ability, I think. Folks, I'm talking to Tom O'Neill. Interesting conversation. Taught in China, going back to teach in China. We'll have a break. We'll come back. We'll wrap it up. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. My guest, Tom O'Neill, taught in China for 10 years. Tom, in closing, what would you like to say to the American viewers about, the educational system and what you've learned in China? I got about 2 minutes.
Well, if you really truly want to be a successful teacher, you have to accentuate everything that's positive in the student. Because when you accentuate everything that's positive within the student, you're accentuating everything that's positive within yourself. So if you reach out and try to help a struggling student by respecting that student, you'll find that their student will respect you. And if you care about the student will care about you. And I think anyone that could take those qualities will be successful, and no matter what they do. It doesn't have to be teaching. I mean, when I was growing up, I learned so much from the immigrants, like, the Italian immigrants, Polish, Lithuanian. They were very respectful, and it was only natural. If you like someone, it's only natural that they're going to like you. Mm-hmm. So if you show people that you like them and that you respect them, it's obvious that you're going to receive everything you give.
Yes. Well, you've certainly been doing a great job over there. Okay, he's talking to Tom O'Neill, and he'll be going back to China. Now, Tom, let's not make another 10 years before you come back on the show. Folks, as we were showing, I was talking to Tom, you saw clips of his students and some of the things that he has going on in China. It's a learning process. I want to say this in closing to my fellow teachers. You're doing a fabulous job. It's a very difficult task. And believe me, you need more support from parents, guardians, and the community. You need that support. Instead of yelling and screaming at teachers, we should be trying to help teachers. Instead of, your kid does something wrong, maybe they did do something wrong. Don't take it out on the teacher, all right? And teachers are not parents. They're not sociologists. They try to do their best they can, and they work hard at it. So I'm hoping that we have a lesson learned, particularly in the United States. In some cases, we have colleges that are a total disgrace. They are a total disgrace, and they're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars going to these colleges. We'll see you next time.